I'm Timo Koopman and I'm one of the directors here at Koopman Rare Art. Today I'm going to focus on probably the greatest retail establishment England ever had at this period, and that was Rundell and Rundell. Rundell and Rundell were the royal retailers to the Crown for George III, and mostly and more importantly were the great splendid pieces of George IV, the Prince Regent. And at the head and height of this operation and firm was a gentleman called Paul Storr. If I think of all the European royal households, there's silver in every single place by Paul Storr. The White House has silver by Paul Storr. The great collectors have silver by Paul Storr. There isn't a museum in England that doesn't have a piece of silver by this wonderful artisan. And this particular terrine here, this wonderful soup terrine that you see there in the neoclassical design and period and style, has the elegance and the sweeping lines that you see associated with neoclassical silver. And this particular one was made for the Earl of Camden. It was made in 1794 and an enormous commission. This is just before Paul Storr becomes part of Rundell and Rundell, and it was this enormous commission which grabbed their attention. In fact, in 1807 they take him on board, and it's a fantastic relationship that runs all the way through to 1819. And the clever thing about Paul Storr's company was, for the first time, the relationship changed somewhat. In the early 18th century, you have the architect working in-house with the company. You would go as a client to the workshops with your architect, and you would approach your silversmith and you would say, okay, these are the designs we have, and this is kind of what we would like to have. The beauty of Paul Storr's company and Rundell and Rundell was, for the first time, you have in-house architects, the likes of Feed, Flaxman, Athenay and Stewart working for this great firm. And there was the finished product to wow you. This great, wonderful pair of wine coolers made for Lord Henley in 1820 exemplify this just perfectly. You have wonderful designs here of bacchic masks. You have beautiful acanthus and scrolling vines of grape, this beautiful frieze of grape and vine, and what better object than to serve wine for your table. It's interesting the designs that were used actually by the great firms of Rundell and Rundell. Certainly as a nation we were fascinated by naval architecture. We are an island, and our navy was very important to us, and in fact the great service of state, the royal service, the marine service, is very much focused around that basis. And of course all the great households, all the aristocratic households, the sort of nouveau riche that were coming up at this period, wanted to emulate and copy what they had in the royal household. And so nautical aspects become very important. And what's quite interesting here, you can see rather than having bacchic masks, you actually have the masks of Neptune on the bottom. You have this beautiful shell design just here. And of course here you have that wave, which obviously symbolises the ocean and the importance of our navy. But what better concept than the fluidity of water to come across to serve a vessel that was serving a liquid. So here you have wine served from this beautiful vessel. If you cannot imagine the amount of silver that's being produced at this period, you have 10,000 ounces a week being produced by Rundell and Rundell at this period. You have the military regalia, you have the patriotic vases and patriotic fund that was fueling our heroes coming back from the war campaign. You have the production, obviously, for the royal households, those that were emulating what the royal households had and wanted to keep up with the Joneses at this period. Paul Storr realised and recognised this, and in fact in 1819 he didn't feel like he was getting the lion's share of the pie, and so he steps out alone. His workshops at the height of 1819 were 500 people, producing, manufacturing, chasing, modelling, casting, engraving. I mean, this was the greatest of the retailers, the greatest of the artisans of this period. One of the great rivals of Paul Storr was a gentleman called Benjamin Smith, and I'm going to look at this particular object here. I mean, this is very much is another area of specialisation for Koopman Rare Art. this wonderful Regency period, and particularly Benjamin Smith. Here you have the Egyptian influence on English silver, which lasts for a very brief period of time. You think about things like the Brighton Pavilion, you think about the silver that's there, you think about these wonderful Egyptian type influence objects. Well, in 1798, you have the Battle of the Nile. And so you would have seen scribesmen, draftsmen drawing from the boats that were going down the Nile at the time, and these came back to England, and it absolutely encapsulated and excited the aristocrats and the royal family. And this is a very brief period, as I say, it lasts maybe about 10 years. And here on these baskets, you have this wonderful design. Here you can see the sphinxes just on the bottom, which you see just there. And this is actually a basket that was made in 1805. This is Benjamin Smith, this wonderful rival, working with his architect Digby Scott. He was, of all things, a buckle maker, a sort of shoemaker, buckles and smaller bijouterie. And Matthew Bolton, the great industrialist, actually sees the marvels of Benjamin Smith and what he was capable of, and sets him up in a workshop in Greenwich. And in fact, within 5 years of that, he's Royal Silversmith to King George III, and again, at a later date, the Prince Regent, under the wings of the great company of Rundell and Rundell. And in fact, when Paul Storr dies in the 1840s, there is a movement away from Rundell and Storr and that feeling, but it continues with a legacy. So Paul Storr's nephew, actually John Samuel Hunt, continues the company, and so what was Paul Storr under the Rundell and Rundell suddenly becomes Storr and Mortimer. And in fact, John Hunt takes over from Storr and Mortimer, and if you look at objects by them, and I've got a pair of wonderful ewers and I've got a fabulous soup tureen just on the table, they are mostly stamped again with a retail stamp saying the late Storr and Mortimer. Such was the public's fascination, encapsulation of Paul Storr historically, that it remained even into the Victorian period. Here you've got a beautiful melon-shaped, the fashion of naturalism at this period of the 1830s, form just taking over here, made by John Samuel Hunt, and absolutely splendid. And again, here you have a fabulous pair of ewers with lovely decoration. Here again, that fascination with water and something that serves water and a fluid. Again, Neptune, you have here with his trident, just sitting aloft all these wonderful creatures of the sea. Here you have the hippocamps pulling his vessel on the ocean waves. And again, just this superb mother and child entwined, but in the form of a dolphin. So one sees the legacy continuing, as it were. And indeed, this went on right through to the latter part of the 19th century. And that's why I wanted to focus on this firm. It is the great firm of Rundell and Rundell, which was run for a little period by this wonderful man, Paul Storr.